The Be More bus plan is here. Now, it must be said that not everything I mention in this video is gonna happen. This is merely the MTA's master plan for bus service over the next 10 years. But this is the next step towards making Baltimore's bus system live up to its potential. So then what are we looking at here? Three main things: general operational costs and changes, general capital costs and changes, and an ambitious capital plan to build a fifth bus depot. Let's start with the bus depot because it's probably the most straightforward, even though it's probably the furthest away from actually happening. There's currently 4 MTA bus depots in the area, one off Bush Street, one off Kirk Street, one off Oldham Street, and one off Wabash Avenue. The 5th will go,
I don't know,
somewhere. Location notwithstanding, it's going to provide extra facilities for the storage of buses, facilities for drivers and mechanics, and generally act as a massive asset for the MTA, as it could use its existence to, say, procure more vehicles, which could lead to more service and higher reliability. The thing that's going to be interesting to watch about this particular project is, of course, the price tag. When you're this early in the process, prices you tell the public may not be the final one that the public ends up funding. As it stands, the MTA is estimating this bus depot will cost $650 million in capital funds. Now, that's a very, very important distinction. Why? Because by law, the MTA and other transit agencies in the US are not allowed to conflate their capital budgets with their operational budgets. For those of you not nerdy enough to know what any of that means, basically, despite the popular belief among critics, cutting a few dozen $1,000 salaries at the administrative level or privatizing the bus drivers and ditching union labor will not help pay for this type of bus depot project, nor any capital project, because that would be against the law. Capital projects like this depot could be funded by a variety of sources, though. State tax dollars, federal earmarks and various pieces of legislation, local tax dollars, or even generous donations from very wealthy people. Yeah, that ain't happening. Anyway, that capital budget over the next 10 years would include an additional $365 million in new buses, which includes other things, not just new buses, but that's the main cost. Including the depot, we are now at just over $1 billion in extra funding over the next decade, or about $100 million a year. Honestly, that's not that crazy in the infrastructure world. We built like a mile or 2 of express lanes on I-95 for that price tag, and this will move likely 100 times the people those lanes will over the lifespan of the investment. Moving on, the operational costs now. This involves things like salaries for mechanics, drivers, etc., as well as maintenance, emergency, and field staff. That total is a little bit north of $130 million. Again, over the next decade. Basically, it anticipates inflation of salaries over time, along with hiring a bunch of new drivers over that period. All in all, a grand total of $1.25 billion over the next 10 years to get our buses to do what they do now, and then some. Now, what would that billion-dollar investment buy us, and how long until we saw results? The changes are actually pretty substantial. First and foremost, my favorite of the changes: increased weekend service and frequency. Essentially, while some CityLink routes may run more frequently than this, we're looking at the possibility of service no worse than every 30 minutes. On the surface, that doesn't sound world-beating. But by the MTA's own admission in this PDF, it's better than today's typical weekend service frequency of 1 bus per hour. I mean, those who take the bus and or rely on taking the bus on weekends already know the dire state that things tend to be in. But things are supposed to get better. That's obviously an average of all service, so there's going to be some more or less reliable outliers. But on the whole, we're talking a doubling of weekend service, which I must emphasize means CityLink routes, all of them, will have service no worse than every 15 minutes. Those frequencies will flow right into the increased overnight frequencies of no worse than every 30 minutes and include 8 local link routes, meaning we'll now have 20 bus routes doing overnight service as opposed to just the 12 CityLink routes like we have today. As for the meat of the schedule, the weekday service will operate no worse than every 30 minutes. However, this will be more of a guarantee than a decline in service. What they actually mean by this is they'll be running so many buses, every route should have at least 2 buses per direction per hour. The standards of every 10 to 15 minutes on all CityLink routes and lots of local links will stay largely unchanged, but they're shooting for 10-minute or better service on CityLink's red, gold, green, navy, pink, purple, and yellow. All of these changes are in addition to what the MTA already does every fall, which is sort of see what's working and what's not with the bus system in Baltimore. According to administration head Holly Arnold, there's also a plan to split the yellow up to make it more reliable, which should be coming in fall 2025, so I'm excited to see that come to fruition. Additionally, we're looking at the creation of new routes. Now, these 3 are going to be weekday only, but there's going to be a quick link 41, 42, and 43 to join the already existing Quick Link 40. The 41 will sort of mimic the CityLink Lime, the 42 will sort of mimic the CityLink Brown, and the 43 will sort of mimic the CityLink Silver. Basically, these will kind of be like express services to alleviate congestion on those specific lines. The 2 new local link routes, which have yet to be numbered, will be one from Essex to Whitemarsh and one from Bowley's Quarters to Trade Point Atlantic. As far as extensions go, the Quick Link 40 will be extended west to CMS, the 30 will get extended past Golden Ring, the 31 will get extended to Catonsville, the 32 will get extended to the Glen Burnie Light Rail Station, and the 85 will finally connect to both the light rail on North Ave and Penn Station. The next thing on their priority list, which I'm actually kind of interested to see how this works, is Microtransit. We've all heard the classic transit detractor excuse of, "It don't take me where I gotta go." Well, Microtransit, which is essentially a subsidized version of Uber or Lyft, would help to change that. Now, this is far from revolutionary in the United States. There's plenty of smaller transit agencies that do versions of microtransit. And even the Baltimore area has some form of microtransit in the form of paratransit, which is something for people with disabilities, the elderly, etc., to use to get to, say, a grocery store when they don't have a car and can't really walk. Basically, the way it's described in the plan is a 4-zone system that would work via a mobile app on demand. The 4 zones would be in Bel Air, Edison, Woodlawn, Edmondson, and Southwest Baltimore, and would basically mimic hailing a ride share. Low-key, one of the things I'm interested to see what this affects is maybe Uber and Lyft prices in Baltimore. Talk to anyone who's taken an Uber, Lyft, or just rideshare in general, and the first thing they complain about is pricing. The best part of this overall plan for me, though, is that they don't just stop at the Baltimore region. They keep pushing elsewhere. Their plan for regional bus service is honestly great. Currently, the MTA contracts out coach bus companies to supply commuter bus services to areas all across Maryland and into DC. There isn't a clear consensus in the plan, from what I can see, that details whether or not this would replace the commuter bus program or if this would complement it, but nevertheless, these are the proposed routes: Baltimore to Annapolis, Baltimore to Bel Air, Baltimore to Columbia, and Baltimore to Frederick. According to the plan, this would provide all-day service from those locations and not necessarily on the same level as the 9 to 5 commuter model that they have now. Either way, how cool would it be to just get on a bus in Baltimore City and go to Annapolis for the day? Get dollar oysters at McGarvey's, get a bunch of Guinness at Galway Bay, all without having to worry about parking? Or, elephant in the frickin' room when it comes to going to Annapolis for fun and frivolity, the people driving home up 97 drunk or buzzed because no one wants to sit on the local Link 70 for an hour and a half to drink responsibly. Coach bus service like this is also far more comfortable than a typical city bus and makes our highways and interstates way safer, especially in the summertime when everyone wants to go out on the weekend to party in places that aren't in their backyard. Speaking of elephants in the room, time for the question that we all have on our minds. Why can't we just do all this stuff right now? As a bus rider, I'm frustrated about this too, to be honest. However, the reasons for this stuff being part of a plan and not actions being taken at this very moment is fairly straightforward: staffing and funding. New rule on this channel: when I talk about funding, I'm going to now recite the following. Public transportation is a public service that does not need to turn a profit to be useful to the public it serves. Funding it with tax dollars is at worst a convenience fee to keep as many cars off the road as possible for those who actually need to drive or have no option but to drive. As far as staffing goes, the MTA is doing a ton to combat their low employee to revenue vehicle ratio, but only so much can be done to hire new drivers if you don't have the budget necessary to hire and train more drivers right now. I hate that this even has to be said, but it does need to be reinforced to the public transportation detractors, largely on social media, but also in everyday life, that cutting $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, even $400,000 or $500,000 in administrative salaries does nothing in the grand scheme of things to hire the most bus drivers possible. You're not going to get the type of service frequency that a city deserves just by firing some administrators to own the libs. You're also not going to make any dent in quality of service by getting rid of union labor, because there's just too much value lost in that case to brain drain. Institutional knowledge is crucial at what I would argue is an inflection point in the history of the Maryland Transit Administration. All that said, Be More Bus will obviously be a vast improvement over what we have now. But like most things to do with transit in Baltimore, implementation is, for better or worse, in the hands of largely suburban Annapolis politicians that drive everywhere, who I'm sure will all have nothing but resoundingly good things to say about this plan, and maybe even give it the exact amount of funding, or maybe more funding than it deserves.
Dumb people are always blissfully unaware of how dumb they really are.